Welcome back to People Junkie, a podcast about people sharing their stories, as everyone has one. And maybe you could connect or be inspired by someone you never thought you would. If you've been following the podcast, we so appreciate it. And if you're new to season 2, thanks for joining. For those of you who are new to People Junkie, I usually have a word that embodies my guest. But today I'm using a term that's called human interest. This term is defined as a quality that affects attention because it involves the experience of real people. And my guest definitely involves himself in the human experience with his Humans of Long Beach series that not only has 1, but 2 books. Now, he made his way from the UK all the way to the streets of Long Beach to start this series. Without further ado, I bring you Matt Roberts. Hi, Matt. How's it going today?
Hello, Laura. Going very well, thanks.
This beautiful day in Long Beach, right?
It is. Makes a change from the last week.
I know. We had a bunch of rain, but, that probably takes you back to where you were born, right? Where you're from in the UK?
It reminded me so much of home, yeah. Home sweet home. Home wet home.
All right. So we're going to start off with that. Talk a little bit about yourself, your background, where you grew up, and then we're going to talk about how you got to the States.
Okay, well, I was raised in a little town, a beautiful little town in the northwest of England called Ellesmere Port, which is a port. It's on the River Mersey, which is the river in Liverpool. And I was told by a friend yesterday that it's just come in 7th place in the poll for the most depressing town in England. So
oh, no.
It wasn't that. Well, I thought it might have finished higher, actually. I thought it might have finished in the top 3. But yeah, it really was that bad a town, basically. The 2 claims to fame were an oil refinery and a car plant. And the sun never seemed to shine. It was a miserable place, still is, but when you've got people and you've got friends and family, you could be living anywhere and you'd be happy, wouldn't you?
Oh, no, absolutely.
So it's not that I wasn't happy there, but it's a horrible town, basically.
Okay.
There's not even a good pub in the whole town.
Oh, a pub. Okay, we'll get to the pubs in a little bit. But okay, so you come from that, I hate to say it, depressing area, and you grew up there until what age? And then at what time did you decide, the United States looks pretty good to visit and maybe live?
Well, I lived there all my life, basically, until I was, I think I was 44 when I came to the States. Yeah. So all my life, from when I was 3 years old, I was actually born in Wallasey, which is closer to Liverpool. Ellesmere Port's about 20 miles away from Liverpool. But to anyone who asks me where I'm from, and every American person says, oh, you're Irish or you're Australian. None of them ever say English. And I lived there all my life, basically, till I came to America in 2008.
And how did that come about?
Well, it's a bit of a long story, but when we moved there when I was 3 years old, a family had just moved in next door, and the boy was 2 years older than me, so we basically grew up together. And he fulfilled a lifetime dream to move to America in about 2005. He left us, deserted us, and went to live in America. And I continued my life in England, and I was married and in a relationship for like 19 years, which ended very amicably. But then I was in the early 40s and suddenly I became a single guy with no response. I haven't got children, so there was no responsibilities. And the first thing I did was start booking these. I went to Brazil and Southeast Asia, traveling the world, basically going on holidays, not anything long duration. And then after about a year, I went to my boss and says, listen, I want to go and see the world, so I want some time off. And he very sensibly said, well, if I say no, you'll only probably do it anyway. So he gave me 12 months off, and I planned this round the world trek solo, which was one of the best things I ever did. I went to Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and then all South America. And my mother joined me in New Zealand for her 70th birthday. So it was the best trip. It was eye-opening, seeing all these different places. And then I got back to England, went back to work, and suddenly it dawned on me that this was it for the rest of my life, basically. And I can't remember why I actually made the appointment or anything, but I went to see the doctor, and when I walked in and he looked up and said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "Well, I've just been feeling really down," and burst into tears, which surprised me a lot more than it did him, I think, because he just reached into his drawer, got out a box of tissue paper and said, napkins, and says, "You wouldn't believe how many people come in here and do what you've just done," which made me feel a bit bad. Basically, I was depressed, very depressed. And he put me on medication and signed me off work. This event that happened to me was the proof was in the pudding, basically. I hadn't done it, nothing serious had happened. It was just something had happened to me, and I couldn't get out of bed, and I wouldn't say suicidal, but I wasn't far off, to be honest. Anyway, Phil came back from America on one of his biannual visits to see his family, the guy who lived next door. And we went out for a beer, and he saw what the state I was in. And he said, as we were partying at the end of the night, he said, "Why don't you come out to America? I'll sort you out with a job," because he'd done well for himself. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. I went home, went to bed, and lay in bed the next day and whatever, and got an email about a week later with an airplane ticket he bought with his air miles to come over to America that Christmas. So,
wow.
Yeah, which is...
Yeah, that must have been something. May I ask before we go forward? I mean, this is amazing what you're talking about, because now mental illness is such a huge thing, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. And I don't even like the word mental illness. I just think that, you just feel the feels is what I call it. And a lot of times, especially in, years back, even about 15 years ago, you couldn't really talk about it. Even maybe 10 years ago, people still had that stigma and were ashamed. But before that, you talked about, how you had a job. What was that job that allowed you to just trek across the world, and then you came back to it? Because that is almost unheard of here in the United States.
Well, they call it a sabbatical in England, or in Europe, basically. And a lot of people do it. A lot of people do it when they finish university before they go into full-time employment. But I was working for the government. I think that always helps. I think they make their own rules as they go along, sort of thing. I was working for local government as a highway engineer, building and designing and building roads, basically, and maintaining them. Wow. And there's always someone who can fill in for you, isn't there? And as I explained it to the big boss, I want to do this thing. I've got probably 20 years left of work, and I've been working here for over 20 years. I want a break, sort of thing. And as I said, he said, "Well, if I say no, you'll probably go anyway," which I would have done. So he just said, "Right, fair enough. Sort of make sure your pension's in order and come back in 12 months," which was very nice of him.
Oh my gosh, like I said, that's an amazing story in itself, because over here we don't have holiday, we don't have, the luxury of that, because there's always someone. I mean, you're so desperate for work, especially nowadays, that you're afraid to go anywhere, because you don't want someone else to not just take your place for that time that you're gone, but swoop up your job, and then you have nothing. So that's very interesting in itself. Yeah. So thank you so much for talking about that, because I bet you people were wondering, because I know I was wondering as well. So you were lucky enough to have a mate, as you say, buy you a ticket to the US and go from there.
Right. So that was he got the flight ticket for the Christmas. So I came over at Christmas. I was still ill. I was still off work. Still been signed off work, and came over here, and we went to some beautiful places. We went up to Mammoth, all around LA, and I still hadn't made my mind up. I was still in cuckoo land, basically. And the last weekend, we went down to San Diego, and coming back up to Long Beach, we stopped at San Clemente. And I remember getting out the car at the little car park down by the pier, and the surf was breaking, the turquoise surf, and the palm trees were swaying. And it was the eureka moment, if you like, when I thought, I'm coming. I turned around to Phil, I said, "I'm coming." And that was it. It was spooky, really. How there was just that one defining picture that made me decide it's either go back to Ellesmere Port for the oil refinery and the car plant, or come here and live like this. And that was the moment that I decided I was coming. And 5 months later, I'd been to the embassy, got my visa, got the job offer, which incidentally, when the job offer came in the post that Phil had sent, it was 10 days vacation per year. And I'd been, with local government, and seriously, I've been having 48 days per year.
That's insane. That's insane.
Yeah. So I wrote back I says, I can't have 10 days vacation in a year. So they changed it to 15, which was probably breaking the rules by their ways. But yeah, I came over, and 5 months later I was here, basically. I arrived with a suitcase and nowhere to live. And fortunately, Phil had been recently divorced, and he'd lived on top of Palos Verdes when he first came to Long Beach, or to California, because he'd been living in Minnesota. And he didn't, because of that, with his family, they didn't really meet that many people up on living on the top of Palos Verdes. And he'd moved, when he'd split up, he'd moved to Long Beach. And the day I arrived, the apartment above his became vacant, which was on Horny Corner. So
yeah, I'll explain what Horny Corner is. Okay, it's not what you think. It's just a name. It was named after someone named Horny. Okay, so and for those who don't know, yeah.
Do you know,
if someone doesn't know, yeah. Go ahead.
I've heard all sorts of reasons. I've seen some of the reasons. I think. But anyway,
go ahead.
Anyway, yeah, and the apartment was right on the corner of 45th, 54th, right, basically on the bay. And this apartment came, and I said, right, I got this apartment. So I'd gone from living in the seventh most depressing town in England to basically living in paradise, looking out my window at the water every morning. It was a hell of a culture shock, basically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and for those who don't live in California or are not privy to Palos Verdes, it's actually one of the most affluent places here on the coast in Southern California. And so, again, going from rainy, depressing, type of weather, and then all of a sudden, the gates part. And then it's, like you said, it's like paradise on earth. So go ahead from there.
Well, that was it. I arrived here and started a new life, basically, a completely new life. At the age of, I was 45 when I came, nearly 45.
And for those who are listening and not watching, it's a totally different experience because I see your wife peeking out and trying to say something.
Sorry. I thought I'd locked her in the bedroom efficiently. I put 2 bolts on. I thought I'd wedged the door so she couldn't get out.
Oh, no. Don't say that here. So anyway, talking about your wife, so obviously I think you guys met. How long thereafter when you got your place, the apartment that you were talking about?
Well, the one I lived when I first came here. Mm-hmm. Well, I got that straight away, basically. It became available the day I arrived. And I got from LAX to Phil's house and rang them up and said, I want that apartment, please. And I'd moved in a week and a half, I think. And in the meantime, I was just dossing on his couch sort of thing.
And then how long thereafter is it when you met your wife?
About 3 years. Met her at a concert and we got married in 2017. So 7 years ago.
Nice.
So we met like 13 years ago.
So you basically lived the American dream. You came here with hardly anything. Yes, you had, a very good job. I'm sure you had money in the bank. But it's like happenstance. Okay, yeah, sure. I'm going to go across the world. And then I decide, all right, my friends, I'm going to go with him on his holiday. It looks good. And this apartment opens up. Like, that is so fortuitous.
Yes, yeah, I know it is, Laura. No, I thank myself. I thank my lucky stars every day, basically. Very fortuitous.
Absolutely.
It all fell into place.
So you got a job here, but then something happened along the way. You met your wife. You got your roots here in Long Beach. And, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on People Junkie is because People Junkie, I want it to be about connectivity, connections and also inspiration. Now, you were talking about how you were an engineer. Okay. Did you know anything about photography or going up to people? Because that's what I'm going to lead into with the Humans of Long Beach. That's something that you're known for. And, I usually have a word of the day that embodies my guests, but your word is not a word at all. Your word is actually a phrase, and it's human interest. And I think that's very interesting. Many of
Right.
you, yeah, many of you have already heard of the Humans of Bombay, the Humans of New York, but then you started the Humans of Long Beach. Talk about how that started, when that started, and did you make any connections with anyone that was part of Humans of Bombay, Humans of New York, and so forth?
Right. Well, when I came over, it was 2008, and that was around the time when Facebook, social media, was basically getting its feet on the ground, and it was an easy way for keeping in touch with people back home, letting them know what I was up to, just by posting pictures on my Facebook page, basically, and they could. It was a perfect way of keeping in touch. So I can imagine if I'd come 20 years earlier, homesickness would probably have figured in my life somewhere, leaving all my friends and family behind. But it didn't, because you can go on social media and it's like you're talking to them, sitting down next to them, sort of thing. So it was a good thing. But one of the first things I bought when I got over here was a camera to aid my social media. I went on a little night school course up by Hartwell Park, trying to learn, because it's not easy, photography. I still haven't mastered it by a long way. Anyway, no. So I was also, from my travels, I also had the exploration book. So I was going off on my bicycle at every given opportunity to just riding, basically, with no particular goal, and just exploring Long Beach, all over the city, everywhere. Probably places I shouldn't have been going, actually, in hindsight.
What does that mean?
Pictures.
What does that mean? Places you shouldn't go?
Well, I remember when Humans of Long Beach was well underway, and there was a Martin Luther King Day festival. They had a big party in the park, up in the park behind PCH, and I got talking to the guy, one of the organizers, and from the way he was talking, I think he was insinuating that I wasn't safe, basically. I said, are you trying to tell me that I'm not safe coming around here? He goes, well, today you are, because there's policemen everywhere, because there's so many people around. He says, but on a normal, everyday day, he says, no, you're not. He says, if some guy's having a bad day and sees you riding around with your camera on your shoulder and, not wanting to be racist, but a white guy, because it's a mainly African-American community around there. He says that'd be the end of you, basically. And I couldn't believe it, because I've been around there, maybe not hundreds of times, but tens of times, meeting people and talking to people who'd all been perfectly nice, etc. But this is one of the people who lived in that particular area. And he said, no, you're not safe coming in. Don't come here, basically, which was a massive shock to me at the time.
Yeah, that's interesting, because one of the reasons I myself moved to Long Beach and actually stayed as many years as I've had is because it's so diverse. I grew up in many people that have been following the podcast know I grew up in the San Fernando Valley in Southern California. I moved to Indiana, came back, moved all over the place in Southern California until I really found my people here in Long Beach. And it's because there's so much flavor, that means diversity for me. And I've never had that. But again, I may look like I'm white. I'm not. I'm Latina, Chicana, Mexicana. And so it must have been a little difficult for you to hear, when you're going around, and maybe you were feeling safe enough to do that. But I do understand where that other individual's coming from.
Yeah, and again, the gang element, there's gangs in Long Beach, which is another thing.
Everywhere.
And a lot of those are based on the color of skin, but unfortunately, you get Hispanic gangs, you get African American, you get Asian gangs. And I think that's what he was also referring to, is that I'm a white guy going into a mainly black neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that would bring some danger in as well. There must be a dozen times when people have said, "Hey, be careful around here." The area by Daisy Avenue and around there, which
Really?
is yeah.
That's interesting. But you know what? I think that's actually a good thing because someone who isn't from here may not know the area as well. And you have people who are definitely looking after you. And that's another aspect why I love Long Beach so much, because there's so many people looking after each other.
Yeah. And going back to the diversity, Laura, it's definitely the most diverse place I've been in America. And I've done a lot of, we've got the biggest Cambodian population outside of Cambodia here, haven't you, for starters?
Mm-hmm. I actually live near Little Cambodia, so it's an amazing place. Yeah, the culinary is amazing. So I mean, that's interesting that happened to you, and I'm glad that you discussed that because everywhere you go, it shows you no place is safe, but then it also shows you the humanity of Long Beach, that people are going to look after you even though they don't know who you are. So with that said, from there, where did Humans of Long Beach take you? I mean, what was actually your first interview?
Right. Well, I got the camera and I was trying to learn how to use it. I was learning how to use it, and it dawned on me that rather than pictures of buildings or landscapes or whatever, it was looking and taking pictures of people that interested me the most. If you had a picture of a group of people, you could look at that for a lot longer than you could look at a mountain or a beach shot or whatever. I found that fascinating, and then I carried this on for about a year. And one day I got the LA Times, and there was an article in it about a guy called Brandon who started this webpage called Humans of New York, which is now absolutely massive. And he was just posting portraits of people who he'd met and a little anecdote either from him or from what they'd said to him. And I found it wasn't a Facebook page or anything, but it was fascinating. And I thought, well, this is what I'm doing in Long Beach. But thought nothing more of it, just continued following his little blog. And then he started a Facebook page, and suddenly, they were, like you say, Humans of Bombay, they were popping up on Facebook. Every city you could think of. Humans of Timbuktu was one, I think. And it was really? all on the same premise of what Brandon had originally started in a different format, but had evolved into now doing on Facebook. And this was probably 2 years after I read the article, and I thought, well, I'm going to start one for Long Beach. And that was the time. And I remember going out, it was December 2012 when I didn't have a notebook or anything. There was very little thought went into it. I just had my camera and the fact I'm going to start a Facebook page from the pictures I take, just posting the pictures basically. And I'd gone about 500 yards and I saw these two lads sat on the median with a sign at the traffic lights. Hungry, can you spare some money or whatever the sign said. And I thought, right, they're my first subject. And I sort of sidled up to them and explained to them, hey, I'm going to do this blog. Can I take your picture? They were just sitting on the side of the road, basically. And, oh, yeah, and they were really friendly. They were traveling all around America. They looked like homeless people. They weren't. They were just travelers. And I took their picture, and I remember the buzz I got when I took the picture and got home and put it on Facebook. There was no likes of anything. There was no likes for the page or no likes for anything. But I put this, and it gave me such a buzz that they'd asked me. I said, "What will you?" I gave them $5. And said, "What will you spend the money on?" He said, "Probably cigarettes," which is a good little line to accompany this picture with this sitting there with their sign. And that was it. That was the first post, and then I think about a week later, the page got a like, and I was like, "Wow, someone's liking what I'm doing." This is because there was no advertising or anything, and slowly but surely it went from 1 like to 10 likes to 100. Hey, there's 100 people like my blooming website, sort of thing, and eventually it got up to 10,000. But it was all by word. It was all by word of mouth, and nothing was done by advertising, basically.
Yeah, it sounds like it was organic.
Yeah, and the quotes that I was posting with the picture, which were minimal, were all from memory, and I've got one of the worst memories in the world, so that was getting tough. So I decided I need to start writing something down, so I remember it when I get home after speak to 10 people. So I'd take a notepad, and then another 6 months passed, and I was finding that a lot of people were, a strange guy comes up, starts approaching them, they sort of speed up and walk along sort of thing. So I got some business cards made, it was a much more effective way of breaking the ice with someone. If you're handing them someone as you go up to speak to them, I found that they were a lot more receptive than just me walking up to them sort of thing. So got the business cards, and it went from there basically. And all the time the content was evolving. It went from just a one-liner to a little story, and by a few years down the line, people were telling me that life stories, well, it felt like that. They were certainly revealing a lot of things that they probably never thought they'd be revealing to a stranger that day, put it that way.
But that's the power of just talking to individuals. Again, People Junkie is also about, you never know if you're going to relate to someone unless you hear their story, right? And you caught on to this. You were basically a street journalist, a gumshoe, basically.
Yeah,
And
basically.
and I actually have a background in journalism and sports writing. I still carry around a pen and a paper everywhere I go because to me it's essential. Absolutely, absolutely, because you never know if an idea is going to spark or you're going to meet someone and jot some things down. And that's why I started following you years ago when I had a radio show at the local college here. I had you on, but it wasn't as big as it is now. And I wanted to bring you back because now I have more of an audience and I want people to know about you, your background, what you've done. And also, if you could talk about more of the stories. So your first one, you thought these people were homeless. They actually weren't. They were travelers. And then you said you started, giving cards away, which actually is a smart idea because a lot of people are going to be like, who's this white guy on a bike? What's he going to take my picture for? That's what I would think if I was just someone, especially nowadays, you just don't know. And with that, you disarm them. And, what's something that you say to them? Like when you walk up to someone, you see me, I'm doing something. What would you say to disarm me?
Well, I'd excuse myself and say, "Excuse me," and hand them the card. Say, "This is a blog that I've been running for a couple of years now, and it's called Humans of Long Beach." And what it is basically is if you've got time, I'll take your picture and I'll ask you a question, and that's all. Basically, all I'd say. And what's the question? I said, "Well, that's breaking the ice, and we've got a conversation going now." So I'd say, "Well, I haven't thought about it yet, but have you got time?" And they'd say, "Go on then," and then we'd be away. Then I'd get the picture and consult me list. Well, not consult it. I'd have me list of questions up here because I did have a list of questions that I'd like to ask that hopefully would get the person to reveal more than just answering the question. I mean, there's nothing worse if they give you a one-word answer to every question you ask. But something that would, a question like, what's your biggest regret? I thought was always one of my favorites because people they'll dig something up there, and once they've told you, oh, it was this, and then you say, well, what happened there, and then you can take it from there, sort of thing. And some of the times I could sit there, I'd be chatting to someone for half an hour. Other times it'd be 2 minutes. But the things that the people revealed over the time were quite fascinating. I'll tell you one story of I met this guy and girl on, I think it was 7th and Cherry, I think it was, in Long Beach. And they'd not long been together, but you could tell they were in love. And in a nutshell, he said that she'd stopped him from gangbanging this girl. Meeting her had been his lifesaver because he was a bad boy and he'd fallen in love, et cetera, et cetera. About 2 years later, 2 or 3 years later, his sister Ashley got in touch with me and says, could you tell my mum's story? And I thought, well, I've never had one arranged. I never had a story arranged before, but yeah, why not? So I arranged to meet her mum, and we met in downtown Long Beach, and we sat on the curb, and she told me a story of how the boy who I'd met with on 7th Street was actually her son, and he'd been shot dead in an alley in downtown Long Beach. Yeah, a couple of years after we'd met, he'd been shot to death.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Truly.
And the mum she was an addict and she was homeless and everything. And she'd come back, and it was a week after she came back that her son had been shot dead. And now she was clean, and we were sat on the curb, the pair of us, and we both had tears streaming down our faces because her story was so moving. And she'd gone clean, and now she's campaigning for gun rights. And Lisa is her name, but she's a wonderful girl, and she's been through everything and back, been to hell and back, especially with her son. But she's come out the other side, and it's always good when you see when good has come of a bad story, if you like.
Wow. But that's amazing because you got the ball rolling just by going up and asking people, what their story is, because everyone has a story. And again, you never know if you're going to make a connection or be inspired by someone and their story unless you hear it. And that's why I value what you do. I value what Humans of Bombay and Humans of New York and all the humans of ... do, because I think sometimes, especially right now with technology, I wish you and I were in the same place. A lot of times that can't happen anymore. And I feel that it's not tangible. And if things aren't tangible, it's like a different world where you don't have that connection. We're going to pause right now. I'm going to let everyone know who we're speaking with. We're speaking with Matt Roberts. He is the person that started Humans of Long Beach. He's an amazing person. He's telling us some of the stories, his background, how he started. And if you missed it, no worries. You can go back. For those who are going to be watching and not listening, he has given us, and thank you so much for the pictures of, Humans of Long Beach, what it's about, and a lot of the pictures that he has of the people that he's telling the stories of. So we appreciate that. So getting back to Humans of Long Beach and you interviewing people, were you ever in any danger doing so? And if you could talk about that.
There was one episode, and this was right at the very beginning, before I'd started really adopting a proper interviewing technique. And it was right at the bottom of the bicycle path on the beach, and there was a girl in a business suit, a posh, well kept girl, on a blistering hot summer's day, asleep on a bench, which I thought was and I sort of screeched to a halt on my bicycle. I thought, that's weird. Why a girl dressed like that would be sleeping on a bench in the middle of the day when it's so hot, it just didn't make sense. So I started getting my camera out and I lined it up. She was sleeping, so I didn't even wake her up or anything. And I heard this shout in the background, and this guy, "You taking my photograph?" And I'm like, oh shit. I wasn't taking his photograph, but he was behind the line of fire, if you like. And I think there was a drug deal going on in that little car park at the end of the bike path, basically.
Oh,
and
my.
he came, his strides got bigger and his pace got faster as he came towards me. Fortunately, he'd started about 45 yards away, so I had time to quickly start pedaling like the clappers for my life, because he was coming to get me, basically. And I think he would have got me, because he thought I was snapping his little drug deal or whatever it was that was going on in the car. Yeah. So that was fun.
Mean, that's a little fair because you are older, white guy, with the camera. A lot of times they think that that's a cop or, someone that is like a sting, going on. So, I mean, yeah. And I'm glad that you got out of there safe and sound, and you were about to tell us another story.
There was another one on 7th Street, and I didn't feel danger at all, but it's 10th Street, there's a mural, and I thought, right, the next person that comes around that corner, I'm going to ask him if I can take the picture in front of this lovely mural. And I came round, and it was this guy in a white vest with tattoos all over his face. And I thought, no, you can't, just because of his looks, you can't change what you said you were going to do. So I stopped him, I explained what I was doing, and he was fine about it. But he lifted his shirt up, and he had longos, which I later found out is one of the big gangs in Los Angeles, the Longos, and he was a Longo, basically. He was a fully fledged guy. He just got out of prison, and he said, "Don't post this picture of this." But that could have been, just approaching someone like that could have been a bit airy, I think. But anyway, we got away with that one. And other than that, Laura, not really. No, not when I felt in danger or anything, really. Despite what the marshal of the Martin Luther King event had said. I mean, I went early on as well, which is there's a boxing club right by the the VIP records on PCH.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what used to be VIP Records. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I went, there's a boxing club, which I didn't know it was a boxing club, but I was just sort of wandering down these streets willy-nilly. And I went into this boxing club and it was fascinating. I spent all afternoon there with these guys and they welcomed me in. But, you know, a white guy going into those sort of places, they could be seen the other way at times, like that fella said. But they were brilliant in there, this little boxing club.
So has anyone? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I interrupted you.
No, in a nutshell, I haven't felt in danger, really. Fortunately.
Okay. No, I mean, that's good. You know, this grew organically. You talked about from, 1 like to 100 likes to 10,000, all that good stuff. You started off just, I'm going to be meandering on my bike with my camera and I'm going to stop people who I think, I just want to, speak to and interview. It went from that. And then now you've had a book out for a while. Talk about there you go. So talk about that evolution and what Humans of Long Beach has done for you. And, okay. I love it. For those.
The second,
go ahead.
To follow on from Humans of Long Beach, and I had no intention of doing a second book, but COVID grounded everyone and I couldn't go out and speak to people or photograph people. And I needed something to do, but I needed a hobby. And Lisa, my wife, said, why don't you do another book? And I thought, So I ingeniously called it More Humans of Long Beach. Thought that was brilliant.
So we got Humans of Long Beach and More Humans of Long Beach. Yeah. For those of you who are watching, you're going to be able to see what it looks like. For those who are listening, we definitely appreciate that. It's a different experience when you're watching it. So we hope you do that as well. So how did you said the second one came about during COVID, but how did the first one come about? And how did that change your life, if at all?
For the first 5 years of doing the blog, doing just the Facebook page, and there must have been over that time, there must have been 20 or 30 people who'd said, you should do a book. Again, like Phil saying, come out to America. I thought nothing more of it. And as the content started getting better and more detail and more interesting, the interviews, etc. And then one day I just thought, when someone said it to me again, you should do a book. I thought, I should. And that's when I started looking into it. And getting a book printed is a damn expensive. You're talking 5 figures to get a few copies of a book. And I managed to find this. I started looking into it and found this printer in Kentucky who gets the printing done in South Korea. And they could do it for a lot more reasonable than American-based printers. And I decided to take the plunge, basically. And there was a guy who I met doing Humans of Long Beach. He told me that he was a graphic designer. So I asked him if he'd be interested in helping me put it together because I knew nothing about Photoshop or any of those things. And then started getting the content together. And then in December 2018, was able to release it. And we had a launch night Made by Millworks, which is that shop on Pine Avenue, which is a home for all the arts of people, artists' work in Long Beach. It was a shop that sold them all. And they had the opening night, and Justin Rudd emceed it, and Heather Kern organised it, and it was brilliant. I couldn't believe people that I didn't know. Obviously, my friends were turning up, came to the opening night, but there was people there who just followed the blog who all came to the book launch. So it blew my mind, basically, that so many people would come out and support me. And that one, I vowed before I released that book that I was going to give $5 of every book sale to a Long Beach charity. And it ended up raising over $3,000 for the Christian Outreach, the Christian Outreach in Action, which is a homeless charity in Long Beach.
That's amazing.
Because that's one thing, in Ellesmere Port, the 7th most depressing town in England, there are no homeless people, basically. And I'd come over here and going around, I was seeing people sleeping in doorways and whatever, and that was a real culture shock to me. And I developed an empathetic side of my nature that I didn't know existed. I would do anything I could to help homeless people. And many times just telling their story was enough for them, sort of thing. You know, that I had that said to me a few times. They thanked me profusely just for getting the story out there, their story of how they became homeless. There's a misconception that everybody who's homeless is either a drug addict or a mental case. But that certainly isn't true from my experience of who I met on the road.
No, and that's interesting because you are delving into other people's lives. They're giving you this information and you really getting to know who they are. You're opening their book. You're seeing more than their cover. Like you were talking about, oh, you know, you thought you saw a gangster person and you're like, oh, you hesitated. But then you decided, you know what, your empathetic side, as you were talking about, you know, I'm just going to ask them questions. So that has changed you in many ways, obviously. How has it changed you work-wise? I mean, did you decide, okay, you know, I'm just going to pursue this and you have been able to live off of it? Or do you still have to have another job, especially the job in which you had before this when you started living in the US?
I haven't made any money out of Humans of Long Beach at all. In fact, it's probably cost me more than I've made. It was never started as a money making idea, and the book wasn't a money making idea. I'd have been happy to have broken even. Basically, I probably did make a couple of dollars in the end, but nothing, no more than $100 or something. So it was never done. I was never going to give up my day job, sort of thing. Never going to be able to do that.
All right, Matt. Now, you said that you did this for the love of doing it. I asked you, you know, if you are able to live off it. You said no. Do you think in the future, though, you'd be able to monetize this and live off of it?
It's never crossed my mind, Laura, to be honest. No, I don't think I would, to be honest. 10,000 likes on a Facebook page, that 10,000 of anything, I don't think is enough to live off anything. I don't know if it's an English thing, but a reluctance to big myself up, sort of thing, to promote myself. I almost feel embarrassed doing it, which is, people tell me that's ridiculous, but they're the sort of things you've got to do to get online. I see all these, you called them influencers, these people who have stuff online and do make a living out of it.
Yeah, the content creators.
And I would love to, content creators, which is that term has only been devised in the last 10 years, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's come about with social media, like a lot of other words. But I just wanted to let you know, I understand. I think it's the age in which we are. I really don't even like going on TikTok. I really don't hate to say that, but I hate to say that because so many, you know, content creators that make a lot of money live off of TikTok. But I feel like people just sell themselves. I look at some of the ridiculous things on there. I'm like, wow, we are truly in an Orwellian world. We are truly in what authors back then thought we would be, and we are. So I understand when you say that, yeah, it's embarrassing. It really is.
My 22-year-old niece came to stay with us last August. And in her spare time, she'd be looking at, I said, what, you look at TikTok? I said, I've never even heard of it. So I put it on my phone. And after 2 days, I had to take it off because it was driving me mad with the content that was on it. Really. People have got no concentration spans anymore, have they?
Or boundaries.
Or boundaries, yeah.
Not at all.
It's a mad world. And like you said, old school, I'm probably the oldest school of all. So, yeah.
No, I hear you. So, you know, you do feel embarrassed, like you mentioned, about self-promotion. But a lot of times you have to do self-promotion and it's easier than getting a publicist. Or have you thought about getting a publicist?
No. And since COVID, when COVID hit, and first of all, I started writing to all the people who'd been in touch over the years. This COVID thing was the weirdest thing for all of us. So I wrote to everyone I had an address of, an email address, and says, can you write down your thoughts on what's happening and send me a picture? So I kept the blog going for 6 months after I wasn't able to go and meet anyone, just by people writing, and I'd edit what they'd written and post it. And that went really well, and it was really interesting. But that sort of, it was becoming too much of a muchness. You still couldn't go out and meet people. So the blog sort of died a death, if you like. And also because I got laid off from work at the beginning of COVID and then got another job 6 months later. And I'm still working from home now. And it's definitely changed the fact that I don't see anyone all day. It's changed me as a person, no end, I think. I'm certainly not as outgoing as I used to be. And I'm struggling to get the mojo back to go back to doing it, because I want to go back to doing Humans of Long Beach. But there's been no new content for 6 months now, really.
Wow.
Other than, yeah, and COVID is mainly to blame. Plus, when I started it, I was working a 4-day week. I was doing 4 10s, so every Friday I'd go out all day. Obviously, it takes time to do these interviews and everything else. And apart from not having the mojo, if you like, I haven't got time at the moment either. So I'm going to get it back up and running, but when, I don't know. The sooner the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I totally feel you. You know, I'm a content creator as well with Long Beach Live here. I talk about the ins and outs, what happens. I even have a weekly calendar now, because I know when I first moved here, there were so many things to do, and I would find them out thereafter they happened. And I just want to give back to the community that way. And now I think I'm an omnivert. You know, I used to be super extrovert. I'd be out there in every single thing I can do. Sometimes I'd go to like 3 or 4 events in one day, and I would tire myself out. And now, I mean, I have to force myself now to leave the house because I'm so comfortable. And it changed, you know, COVID changed us in so many ways I think we can't even fathom until later on. But right now, the immediacy of what you're talking about, I feel the same way, and I know many others do. So look, my mission is to help you get humans of Long Beach back on board, because you are amazing. There's so many people out there. You know, hey, you haven't interviewed me yet.
Yeah, I haven't. You're right. I'll be around.
Maybe I could be the start of, you know, the ball rolling again. But
maybe we'll talk about that after we finished.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah. I just think there's pre-pandemic, pandemic, and post-pandemic. So many lives have changed, and now you're going to get a different perspective. And I think people really need to see that. People really need to see the hope, especially what's going on in the world. I mean, on the brink of God knows what right now. And I feel that people really need more hope and inspiration than ever nowadays. And I really appreciate you and what you've done with Humans of Long Beach, and how you have brought humanity back to those who probably feel that they didn't have any dignity left. And that's amazing. And that's an ode to you. And we have to get you going back on that. And with the start of that, I want for you to please give out all your social media. And if you can actually, you know, spell out what it is for those who are listening and not watching, I'd really appreciate that.
Right. Well, as we've been saying, Humans of Long Beach is a blog about the people of Long Beach, if you like, the humans of Long Beach. And it's those people telling their story, or parts of their story, in a series of posts on Facebook and Instagram. And the Facebook is Humans of LB, and the Instagram is at Humans of Long. Neither of the Long Beach were available, but they're the two social media pages.
Yeah. So listeners and followers of People Junkie, please reach out to Matt, especially if you have stories. I'm sure, Matt, you'd be welcoming of those stories, because now it's a different thing. You know, you said that you used to be able to go out and go up to people. Now people are different. You know, maybe you can start, hey, maybe we can meet somewhere and do a little something, even though it's not impromptu like it used to be. I think that you're still going to generate a lot of organic type of emotions that you did before.
Yeah, I think you're right. One of the things I considered doing to get into it again was writing to those same people who'd sent in their COVID experience at the time, and look back on it and reflect on what they'd said then and how if it was accurate to what they thought was going to happen. I mean, none of us knew what was going to happen, did we? And that's what the people were writing about. I don't know how any of those people got on or if they were accurate. So maybe that's how I could start. I might do that this afternoon. I might write to them.
That's amazing. And you know what? I also film, so maybe something we could collaborate together and possibly make this bigger than, just that blog and the book and the evolution of humans of Long Beach.
Again, Laura, that's another thing is you see a lot of these TikToks and whatever, where they just video someone, where I would talk to them, write it down, and then go back and type it, and probably take an hour over one. You could just video it and put that up.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all about the evolution, but I still like that old school. I still like that tangibleness, and I think if you can find a way to do both things, that's going to be amazing, and that will generate more people to really get your content and seek out your content. But I just want to say, we're coming, close to the end of the podcast. Now, for those who are going to be joining the Patreon, Matt Roberts is going to discuss a little bit more about stories that he has maybe fondness for and ways that maybe you can start a book that you didn't, or give you tips and tricks on, starting a blog or a vlog or, something like Humans of Long Beach. So we're going to do that in a little bit. And I really appreciate, Matt, all the time that you've given me, from years back to now. And I just want you to know you are making a difference. You are making a change in people for the better. And again, you never know if you're going to be the light in the darkness, inspire someone that didn't have inspiration before, just by someone listening to your story right now, and how fondly you talk about the stories that you've asked of people, and for them to give them to you. Yeah.
Many friends who I've met just through Humans of Long Beach, basically. Justin Rudd and Heather are two of the ones who I met through doing the website, and now class them as friends. And there's many more. So it's been good for me as well. There's anyone else. I appreciate
that. Yeah. And I love that you said that you learned empathy. And I just can't believe that where you came from, even though you said it was dark and dingy, there wasn't homeless people here. And then to come to the United States, where everyone thinks it's the land of milk and honey, it's actually, dirt. Because a lot of people, I have a saying, just because you think, the grass is greener on the other side, then you get there and it's all dirt. And sometimes that does happen. Now, the last thing I want people to hear from you is, I think we touched upon that, but where would you want Humans of Long Beach to go from here?
Where would I want it to go? The only goal I would have at the moment, after what I've just said, is getting it going again, basically, and getting enjoyment out of doing it again, which is what I'm working on. Just to get in its current format would be enough for me, just to get that up and running again. And maybe in a few years' time, do a third book, and it would be called Not More Bloody Humans of Long Beach.
That's a great title, though.
I've already worked that one. Humans of Long Beach, not more bloody humans of Long Beach. In brackets, for God's sake, man, give it a rest.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time. We'll definitely get together soon. And again, thanks, everyone. We're listening to Matt Roberts. Thank you so much for Humans of Long Beach, and I'll talk to you soon. Ciao for now.
Thank you very much, Laura. Thanks.
What a fabulous episode. I was speaking with Matt Roberts, talking about himself and his Humans of Long Beach series. Well, thanks for joining People Junkie. Make sure to check us out on all our social media platforms. And if you're on the go, no worries, we got you. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And soon we'll be bringing you guys a Patreon page. So we would love for you to subscribe. And as you know, with Patreon, we do bring more content. So we'll let you know as soon as that comes out. Now, remember, wherever you go or whatever you do, put a smile on your face. You never know whose day you'll make. Ciao for now.